I am an ancient, withered demon. I raised a little granddaughter, preparing to shed my skin and be reborn through her, but I kept raising her, and somehow, by accident, she grew up. Because the child was too small, thin as a stick. Oh well, I'd just fatten her up and then decide. The child brought me cookies, and once I'd eaten her cookies, I couldn't eat her anymore. My child got into university. Saving money was the most important thing. The transmigration could wait. When the child graduated, found a job, bought a house, and had a good life, I would serenely shed my skin, ascending to heaven in one step. I counted on my fingers, joyfully anticipating the auspicious day for my rebirth. Yet, all I got was a grandchild gasping for breath, clutching a blood-stained acceptance letter in her hand. Just a few days into the new semester, our dorm room was already a complete madhouse. First, Annie brought her vegetative grandmother into the room, and then things started to go missing frequently. Our roommate, Chelsea, stared at the empty drying rack, so furious she screamed hysterically. What shameless, poverty-stricken wretch is so desperate, even stealing other people's underwear? Chelsea came from money. The stolen items were all designer brands. How could a pampered princess like her tolerate this? She immediately started indirectly accusing Annie. A perfectly healthy student suddenly brings a paralyzed old woman to live here. If you want to show filial piety, go rent a place outside. Why crowd us? This is a dorm, not your private nursing home. I knew she was scolding Annie, the only poor student in our room. Annie and I were from the same village and were old classmates, so I knew her background inside out. Annie was abandoned in Wyong village right after birth, and kind Grandma Dao Feng Lian picked her up and raised her single-handedly. The two of them relied on each other, their bond very strong. Unfortunately, just as Annie got into university, her grandmother suddenly became paralyzed for no apparent reason. Annie had no choice but to carry her grandma to the city for school, but I truly loathed her grandma because the old woman looked so terrifying. Her aged face was waxy yellow, all her hair and eyebrows gone, leaving her head completely bald. When she unexpectedly opened her murky, triangular eyes, she would just stare at people. Even though I knew it was the unconscious state of a vegetative person, it still made my skin crawl. Annie said her grandma absolutely had to wear a funeral shroud and embroidered death shoes to retain her soul. Otherwise, she would die. Whether she died or not, what did that have to do with me? I didn't want to be cooped up with a terrifying old woman in the same room. So, that very night, I anonymously reported her. The school administration immediately sent the dorm manager to inspect our room. Everyone jumped in shock when they saw a wizened old woman lying on the bed. No one knew how this old woman had managed to bypass the manager and get brought in here. The administrator gently asked Annie if she would agree to move her grandma out. The school could provide additional rental assistance. Annie adamantly refused to leave, crying and screaming that she would carry her grandma up to jump off the building. The school administrators were frightened, fearing a tragedy, and dared not say another word. After all the commotion, the ones who ultimately suffered were the three miserable roommates. Chelsea, Lily, and I. Because of the extra old woman, the room always reeked of a strange, putrid smell, like a nest of dead rats. I even began to suspect, had that old woman been dead for a long time? Otherwise, why would it smell so foul? In the middle of the night, as I was dozing off, I heard a rustling sound. Annoyed, I snapped my eyes open, ready to yell, but as I turned my head, I saw Annie's bed curtain move. A dark shadow slid down. Was Annie planning to steal something in the dead of night? I stealthily raised my head, trying to see more clearly. I only saw the dark shadow silently sliding to the floor, then beginning to crawl. My eyes widened in astonishment. Why would a thief need to crawl with such high difficulty? Just then, the moonlight streamed in through the window, perfectly illuminating the dark shadow's face. It wasn't Annie. It was Annie's grandma. The old woman bent her elbows, straining to crawl on the floor, her withered arms struggling to drag her waist and legs like a slithering snake. Her body undulated up and down, the black funeral shroud reflecting an eerie glow, her embroidered shoes scraping the floor, creating a rustling sound. I rubbed my eyes in panic, thinking I was hallucinating. Opening my eyes again, the old woman had already crawled to the opposite bed. Her sharp nails scraped against the iron bed frame, making a terrifying grating sound. Midway, she stopped. Her bald head suddenly snapped around, staring directly at me. Her two empty pant legs dangled in the air. I was so scared I quickly squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be fast asleep. Suddenly, an ancient, hoarse voice echoed in the silent dorm. "Ah, ah." I clutched my pounding heart and cautiously peeked my eyes open. Just then, I saw the old woman straddling Chelsea and reaching out to choke her. Chelsea let out an uncomfortable groan but didn't seem to wake up. I swallowed, shrinking into my blanket. Tonight was the full moon of the 7th lunar month. Perhaps I'd encountered a ghost. The next day, I slept soundly until noon, woken by the sound of a blender. Pulling back the curtain, I saw Annie blending baby food. Her grandma still lay motionless on the bed like a corpse. I still felt scared and patted my chest. It was just a nightmare, after all. Poor Annie looked at me. "Tina, could you please help me turn Grandma over this afternoon?" I agreed immediately. "No problem, we're from the same village, after all. Your grandma is my grandma, too." After Annie left, I stared at the vegetative person lying still on the bed and gently said, "Grandma, I'm going to turn you over now, okay?" I grabbed her arm and with force flipped her over. The old woman simply rolled over on the bed. Her triangular eyes wide, she stared at me in horror. I poked at her nasal feeding tube and softly apologized. "Sorry, Grandma, I couldn't control my strength." I grabbed her shoulder and pulled her forward. 2 buttons snapped open and came loose. My hand froze midair, my mind buzzed. Chelsea's missing lingerie was being worn by the old woman, a youthful pink made of real silk. Annie's grandma was a truly old woman, her face terrifyingly ugly, wrinkled, and aged, but how could her body be as young and smooth as an 18-year-old girl? Even stranger, around her neck was a very popular Van Cleef and Arpels designer necklace and a matching bracelet on her wrist. The whole set was worth nearly 60,000 yuan. But Annie had been a poor student receiving subsidies since she was little, right? I pushed the old woman away and carefully lifted the bulging blanket at the foot of the bed. Aha! Miu Miu leather shoes and handbag, a flared skirt and sunglasses, a Burberry coat. How could this be? How were these things here? I bit my fingernails, racking my brain but couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, a hand grabbed the hem of my shirt, scaring me so much I almost fell backward onto the floor. That hand was surprisingly soft, like a young girl's. The old woman opened her mouth wide, struggling to utter a series of sounds. Ah, ah, ah. Her voice was that of a young girl. Outside, the sound of Annie and Lily arguing echoed. It seemed Annie had stolen Lily's boyfriend. Annie usually pretended to be innocent and pure, but turned out to be a conniving slut who specialized in stealing other people's boyfriends. Hearing footsteps getting closer, the old woman suddenly let go of me and quickly closed her eyes. She reverted to being a corpse-like vegetative person. I felt a little scared and quickly went online to find a Taoist master for advice. After a long while, the Taoist master finally replied, "I suspect this old woman is an ancient demon looking for a substitute body among your dorm mates. Once she fully sheds her skin, the substitute will be completely possessed." I shuddered. "How do I know whose body she's shedding?" The Taoist master replied, "Someone who eats and lives with her." I gripped my phone tightly, my heart suddenly pounding. At night, I didn't dare to sleep soundly. Sure enough, just before 11 p.m., Annie's grandma, like a black python, rustled down from the bed. Only this time, her target was my bed. My eyes wide, I watched helplessly as the old woman straddled me, punching my chest with all her might. As she punched, she kept uttering, "Ah, ah." I didn't dare to move, stealthily pulling my head back under the covers. Just as I was about to close my eyes, long, thin fingers suddenly pried open my eyelids. The old woman's bald head abruptly pressed close to my nose. I wanted to recoil but couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt constricted, unable to utter a sound. The cold moonlight shone on her sallow face. Beneath her bald brow, a pair of sunken, gray eyes stared directly at me. Suddenly, a foul-smelling tongue protruded from her mouth, forcefully licking my eyeball. The sharp pain in my eyeball made me tremble uncontrollably. After licking my left eyeball, the foul-smelling tongue moved to lick the right. I was in so much pain that I broke into a sweat and blood splattered. As she licked, she yelled with her putrid mouth, "Ah, ah, ah, ah." I don't know how long it lasted before she finally got off me. My eyes streamed with tears and I continuously muttered, "Amitabha, Amitabha." I had nightmares almost all night. Vast cornfields, a room door that wouldn't lock, and a cold, snake-like hand clamping my mouth, attempting terrifying acts. I screamed loudly in my dream, struggling desperately, when I suddenly stumbled and woke up with a start. A drop of sweat fell into my eye, making me wince in pain. I quickly grabbed the mirror from under my pillow. My eyes were riddled with red blood vessels. Turning my head, I saw a dark bruise on my chest and a faint line of bruises under Annie's shirt as well. It wasn't a dream, it was real. Sweating profusely, I yelled out excitedly, "That old woman cannot stay in this room any longer. She's an ancient demon, she wants to steal Annie's body." Chelsea and Lily looked at me like I was an idiot. "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, were you dreaming? What demon? What body? Did you watch a horror movie last night?" I got off the bed, pulled out my chat history with the Taoist master to show them, and then told them all my recent observations and deductions. Chelsea's eyes nearly popped out. "Don't scare me. How could a regular old woman possibly be a demon? Why don't I see any dark bruises on Annie?" Lily wasn't very convinced either. "It sounds too outlandish. It can't be that bad. Besides, what do Annie and her grandma's issues have to do with us?" Chelsea added. "You two are from the same village and have a good relationship, but Annie stole my boyfriend, why should I help her?" Lily glared at Annie and said, "How reliable is that 50 yuan Taoist master you found online?" Chelsea added, "And why should I help a thief?" Suddenly, the old woman on the bed let out another, "Ah, ah." I broke into a sweat, worried. "You too, listen, does this sound familiar? Does it sound like Annie's voice? The thief and boyfriend stealer is that demon old woman. Annie is actually trapped inside that old woman's body. Once she finishes shedding her skin, Annie's body will be completely possessed." Lily, bold, rushed to the bedside and softly asked, "If you're Annie, say ah once. If not, say ah twice." After a moment of deadly silence, a desperate ah echoed in the air. "Ah," Lily asked again, "so Annie is actually your grandma now?" The old woman's eyes were agitated, and she squeezed out another ah from her throat. The three of us collectively took a sharp intake of breath. Chelsea couldn't figure it out. "So what does ah mean?" I blurted out. "Maybe she's saying, 'Help me.'" The old woman on the bed looked at me gratefully, letting out an excited ah. I suddenly realized, you didn't actually want to harm us. You were trying to call for our help while your grandma was asleep, weren't you? The old woman's eyes welled up with tears, and she softly said, "Ah." Chelsea bit her lip, a pang of pity in her heart. Lily looked troubled, her eyes welling up. After all, they were all teenage girls who could have a heart of stone. I looked left and right, making sure Annie wasn't in the room before lowering my voice. "Annie and I grew up in the same village. She's an orphan, and she's lived a very hard life since childhood. I suspect this old woman adopted her precisely to shed her skin. When we were little, the adults in the village wouldn't let us play at her house, saying she was a boogeyman who specialized in eating children's fingers. Look, she used every trick in the book to get Annie into university, to escape the countryside. Wasn't it so she could leave that remote village herself? Could you really bear to see Annie possessed by that demon, turning into a paralyzed old woman? The Taoist master said that as long as the skin hasn't been completely shed, there's still time. If we pay him 800 yuan, he can come personally deal with this demon. I'll pay for it, you just need to help. If girls don't help other girls, this world is truly beyond saving." Chelsea hesitated for a long time, finally grasping the old woman's withered hand, and nodded. "Let me pay for this. Annie, don't worry, we will definitely find a way to save you." Lily also took Annie's hand, her eyes shimmering with tears. She looked at me with a sincere expression, then blurted out, "Tina, do you agree?" I stared at the old woman's bare neck, only wondering where the Van Cleef and Arpels necklace had gone, and answered casually, "Of course I agree, because I'm very curious." Clearly, the person I hit with a brick that day was Annie. How did the person in the bed turn into her grandmother? That evening, pretending to go to work, I secretly led the Taoist master back to the room. The Taoist master gave each of us a soul-summoning banner to plant in 3 directions in the room. He shook the bronze bell in his hand, his face serious, and instructed us. "Later, the 3 of you must write your bazi, 8 characters of birth time on red paper, and hand in hand together, summon Annie's soul. The bazi must absolutely not be written incorrectly. If it's wrong, the soul inside the demon will die completely." The 3 of us all used cinnabar pens to write our bazi and gave them to the Taoist master. The Taoist master burned the bazi into ash, carefully poured it into the feeding tube, mixed it with blessed water, and poured it into the old woman's body. The Taoist master then took a mouthful of yellow wine and spat it out forcefully. The old woman's body twitched as if electrocuted, bounced high, then fell back onto the bed with a thud. My body twitched and I felt a little dizzy. The Taoist master yelled loudly, "Summon the soul." He began to walk around the bed, muttering our bazi and incantations. The old woman suddenly began to convulse, letting out terrifying screams. I narrowed my eyes, coldly observing her transformation. She suddenly let out a tragic scream, spat out a mouthful of black blood, and stopped breathing. The feeding tube fell to the ground, full of black blood gushing back up. The Taoist master clutched his chest, fell limply to the ground, blood streaking from his orifices. He struggled to calculate with his fingers, his face astonished. How? How could this be? Is the Bazzi wrong? Whose Bazzi was written incorrectly? It's over, it's over, it's over. The girl trapped inside the demon is truly dead this time. I stared at the rigid, motionless old woman and sighed deeply in relief. Chelsea and Lily watched all this in horror. How? How could it fail? Exactly. They had been plotting for so long, performing this charade every day with me. How could it possibly fail in the end? Of course, it's because my Bazzi was fake. From the very beginning, I knew this whole group intended to gang up and scheme against me. The body that demon actually wanted to steal wasn't Annie's, it was mine. Because on that demon's chest was a cinnabar mole, exactly like the one on my chest. The human skin it was shedding was mine. I stretched my stiff neck, sat backward on the chair, propping my chin, and chuckled. You all can stop pretending. A vegetative old woman would need at least 2 people to sneak her in. I'm not Annie's accomplice, so it was obviously the 2 of you. Moreover, the interesting thing about listening to people argue isn't what they say, but how they say it. Every time Chelsea finished scolding Annie, she couldn't help but secretly glance at Lily with an apologetic look. Lily, where is your boyfriend? Who did Annie steal him from? That naive, foolish girl, her acting truly was clumsy. And that stinking Taoist master. You weren't the one I found online at all. I told you I was in women's building number 8, but you went straight to the door of building number 6 to find me precisely. You all set up such a grand play. What you really wanted was my Bazzi, right? Annie became vegetative. Her grandma successfully possessed her body to go to school in her place. But if this continued, the old woman's body would eventually die. So you all ganged up, wanting to steal my body, right? I'm going to university in another city. Later, even if my mother finds out I'm not doing well, she'll just think I've grown my wings and flown away. Even better, Annie will disappear completely. How would a rural woman like my mother know where to find her daughter? You are truly wicked. Why do you always pick on a country girl like me and torment me to death? Do you think I'm easy to bully? The 3 people opposite me looked at each other, the panic on their faces undisguised. 2 foolish girls and a Taoist master against me? No chance at all. I retrieved the pinhole camera hidden in the pothos plant pot, smirking. Tomorrow, I'll call the Ministry of Education to report you all for organizing superstitious activities in the dorm with ill intentions towards me. Annie is a poor student, but her entire body is covered in designer brands. I'll report her to disqualify her from receiving subsidies, then expose her online as a vain, ugly fraud. I'll sue the 3 of you for ganging up to bully me, drugging me, causing me nightmares every night, and severely damaging my body and mind. If I call the police, this would be a criminal case, wouldn't it? I demand that you compensate me 300,000 yuan for physical and emotional damages, or else just wait to go to prison. Looking at my furious roommates, I burst out laughing. You fools! Annie is a country bumpkin. Where would she get the money to buy a blender worth over 10,000? That old woman is crippled. Even if she possessed Annie's body, she wouldn't fix her limp. Just observe carefully enough, and flaws will inevitably be revealed. From the very first day I moved in here, I knew this Annie was fake. Because the real Annie was beaten to within an inch of her life by me on the day she received her university acceptance letter. Not only that, I also tore her dress, fabricating the scene to look like she was humiliated and murdered. Because Annie is the person I hated most in this world. The first time I killed Annie was when I was 9 years old. My mother went to harvest corn. I was home alone doing homework. Old Man Liu, the lecherous old man in the village, sneakily entered my house, knowing the way. Seeing my mother wasn't home, he reeked of alcohol, intending to do bad things to me. I screamed in terror, kicking wildly, struggling desperately. Old Man Liu grabbed my hair, forcefully banging my head against the wall. Before long, I was dizzy. In a daze, I heard a clear, piercing scream. "Grandma, there's a bad guy entered Tina's house." It was Annie's voice. In that instant, I sobered up. Old Man Liu was still trying to harm me. I gritted my teeth and bit his shoulder, biting until my whole body trembled. Annie's grandma rushed in with a sickle, kicked Old Man Liu in the butt, and started yelling, "You beast, you don't even spare children. You're worse than a dog or a pig, get out of here quickly. Or I'll cut off your manhood right now." Annie also grabbed a stick and furiously hit Old Man Liu. Old Man Liu muttered curses, pulling up his pants and scampering away on all fours. Annie's grandma, sweating profusely, checked on me and let out a heavy sigh of relief. She wrapped her leg around me, her voice trembling. "It's okay, that beast didn't do anything to you yet. Wait for your mother to come back, tell her to take you to the village chief to report the crime." That repressed, insane Old Man Liu, I'm afraid he'll cause trouble again later. I sat blankly on the bed, dazed. Was the girl so scared she lost her soul? In that moment, I knew I wasn't scared senseless. I quietly watched Annie hiding behind her grandma. She had a thick, long, black braid. I heard that every walnut season, her grandma would take a pole and beat the tree, cop. She would harvest a full basket of walnuts, peeling them until her hands were stained green, drying them crispy, and putting the pure white kernels into steamed buns for her to eat. Each steamed bun also had a fried egg. All the eggs laid by their chickens were for her alone. Only with enough nutrition could she grow up healthy. That's why Annie's skin was smooth. She was lively and cheerful, laughing as clear as an innocent chick. She even had 2 sparkling hair clips on her forehead, the kind I always longed for, but my mother never allowed me to wear anything on my head. She would only scold me. "You stinker, not focusing on your studies, always dressing up for some boy." Annie and I went to school together since we were little. There weren't many children attending school in the village, so the village school had closed down. Children who wanted to go to school had to walk 2 hours through mountain roads to reach the town school. Every day, Annie's grandma would use a cane, walking from deep in the dark until dawn. The two of them would walk and talk and laugh, their laughter piercing my heart like needles. My mother, however, never took me to school. She would only say, "Studying is useless. Do you expect me to take you? If you're scared, stay home, don't go." My mother came back very quickly. Seeing something unusual in the house, her eyes revealed clear panic. Annie's grandma roughly recounted the story. My mother looked at me, her face turning pale then green, and rushed forward to slap me across the face with all her might. "Why didn't that son of a bitch harm someone else but harmed you? Our Annie is so pretty, why didn't he touch her?" "Isn't it because you're a slut?" Annie's grandma hurriedly stopped my mother. She didn't understand why my mother was violently beating me. But I knew, because Old Man Liu had always been involved with my mother. Today was the day they were supposed to meet. My mother feared Old Man Liu would take an interest in me, so she got enraged and was determined to beat me to death. Outside the gate, Annie turned her head and looked at me with a look of pity. That very look suddenly made me want to dismember and tear her apart. She was just a bastard child, an abandoned child, just picked up and raised by that crippled old woman Dao Feng Lian. By what right did she pity me? What gave her the right to pity me? The second time I wanted to kill Annie was when I was 12. A TV station came to the mountains to find poor children to participate in a life swap program with rich kids. I was very eager, trying my best to show off. After all, I was good at studying, smart, and eloquent. Even the teacher specifically recommended me. Annie only hid behind her grandma, timidly peeking her small head out. Yet in the end, the TV station chose Annie. Because I still had my mother and stepfather, our house was still brick and tile, while Annie only had a crippled old woman, and she herself was an abandoned child. My so-called stepfather was none other than the lecherous Old Man Liu who had assaulted me. My mother eventually married him. She said that for a mother and orphaned child like us, having a man would prevent us from being bullied. I watched Annie sitting in the TV station's car, speeding away, my hands clenched, my lips bitten until they bled. Why? Why was Annie no better than me? If I had the chance, all of this should have been mine. Annie went to live with the rich family for half a month. When she returned, she was dressed like a princess from a fairy tale. She jumped out of the car, burst into tears, and rushed into her grandma's arms. Oh, there was another little girl also crying in her arms. Later, I learned that rich girl's name was Chelsea. I didn't know what magic Annie's grandma possessed that even a rebellious girl like Chelsea would hug her and sob. Perhaps it was because I had never been loved like that. I thought love was something that made people cry. After Chelsea returned, every half a month she sent things back to Annie. Of course, I stole all of those things. Annie was dumb as hell, and her grandma was old and crippled, knowing nothing even less. From then on, I developed a habit of stealing. In the dorm room, all of Chelsea's designer brands were stolen by me, so when I saw them being worn by that old woman, I was startled. Actually, I recognized Chelsea on the very first day of school. The mole on her left cheek was too obvious, and whenever she spoke, it was loud and clear, just like when she was little. Lily was the child who was tricked and sold by human traffickers to the village next to ours. When she escaped, Annie's grandma saved her. That incident caused a huge commotion. The entire neighboring village turned the mountain upside down with flashlights but couldn't find her. What reason could connect these three seemingly unrelated people so tightly? It could only be gratitude, reborn kindness, life-saving grace. The last time I killed Annie was when I had just received my university acceptance letter. My mother had no money for my tuition, telling me to figure it out myself. She said I was a troublesome child. What's the point of going to university? Better to earn money early. She also emphasized many times that when I married, I had to give her 300,000 yuan as a bride price, or she wouldn't let me off. Liu Wen secretly touched my bottom, saying he'd give me 5,000 yuan without my mother knowing. I was tempted. I didn't want to be home. My mother would beat me to death if she found out. If I wanted to do that, it could only be in Wyong Village. To get to Wyong Village, I had to pass a reservoir. Liu Wen went first. I took out a pair of gloves and put them on, waited for the right moment, and gave him a strong push. Liu Wen slipped straight into the lake. He struggled in the water a few times, then sank. I let out a cold laugh, brushed off my hands, and was about to turn back to find the money. As I looked up, I saw Annie not far away, holding an EMS envelope the same color as mine. She stood stunned, slowly retreated a few steps, then suddenly turned and fled. I grabbed a brick and furiously chased after her. In that instant, I had only one thought. Annie had seen me kill someone. I couldn't go to prison. Annie ran into Wyong Village, screaming hysterically. Adrenaline surged, making me feel like I had divine assistance. I pinned her to the ground, blow after blow. I attacked her with the brick, just like I had done countless times, skillfully and with glee. Finally, I brutally tore Annie's dress, shoved Liu Wen's lighter into her mouth, and swaggered away. At that time, I thought Annie was surely dead. Who would have thought that on the first day of school, she would carry her grandma to enroll? I was so scared I almost lost my soul. But Annie seemed to have lost her memory and was still the same towards me, making me think everything that happened in Wyong Village was just a dream of mine. I told you, I'm very smart. The moment Chelsea and Lily walked into the dorm, I smelled something unusual in the air. Their body language was so familiar, but their words pretended to be strangers. Very quickly, I roughly deduced. Annie should have died or was half dead, trapped in her grandma's body to sustain her life. That's why she had to wear a fake funeral shroud to prolong her life. Annie's grandma had taken her place to go to school and at the same time sought revenge on me. She gathered Lily and Chelsea, those who wanted to repay their kindness, and created haunting phenomena in the dorm, hoping to lure me into voluntarily giving up my bazzi. Body snatching and soul swapping, the most important thing is the bazzi. Only they didn't know, I had long since guessed that Annie's grandma was not human. Countless mornings and evenings, following them, I saw Annie's grandma's eyes flash with a greenish fluorescent light in the dark, like a demon. I had experienced the most wicked and cruel things in the world, so what is there to fear from ghosts and demons? 300,000 yuan was transferred in an instant. I glanced at them contemptuously. Fighting me? These city people are still too naive. Haven't they ever heard the saying, where the mountains are green and the water's toxic, villains are born? I smugly pushed open the dorm room door, my smile instantly froze on my face. Outside, why was it so pitch black? I turned my head to look back. The girls' dorm had vanished. Clear, resonant chanting suddenly poured into my ears from all directions. The ritual should have failed, right? I clamped my ears, knelt blankly in the darkness, my head throbbing as if it would explode, fear like a foul-smelling shroud tightly enveloping me. Annie's voice echoed down from above. You calculated everything, but you forgot about your mother, didn't you? I sent her a 200 yuan red envelope. She sent me your lunar birth date, accurate to the minute. Tina, you are too arrogant. Actually, what I wanted was for you to think you had victory in your grasp, so you would lower your guard. Because what I truly needed were just the 3 words, I agree, uttered from your own mouth. I looked up in horror, dazed, when I saw a P-shaped beam of light. Following the light, it was the bed in the room. A giant talisman was pasted above the bed, slowly swaying with the Taoist master's increasingly solemn chanting. In a flash, I guessed what it was. That beam of light was a pair of eyes. I had been trapped in the old woman's body. Despair, like a snake, squeezed my throat. When I woke up, I found myself lying on the narrow bed, unable to move, only able to try my best to move my eyes around, trying to see more clearly. Annie crawled out from under the bed. Her skin was covered in talismans drawn with cinnabar ink. Chelsea and Lily had similar markings. These were spells. And I was lying on the ground, my body naked, from my forehead to the soles of my feet covered in red cinnabar soul-returning talismans. The ceiling was covered with soul-summoning banners and soul-summoning bells, clinking in the wind. The entire girls' dorm, it turned out, was a ritual site. The Taoist master, looking tired, nodded at them and quietly left the room. Chelsea and Lily helped my body up, anxiously calling out, "Annie, wake up, wake up!" Annie's grandma hugged me, tears streaming down her face. "My child, my good grandchild, wake up quickly." I slowly opened my eyes, dazedly calling out a few times. "Grandma, Grandma, Lily, Chelsea, why are you two here? Where am I?" Chelsea was overjoyed to the point of tears. "Did you forget? We said we'd go to university together. We're in the same dorm." Lily hugged me, sobbing uncontrollably. It's wonderful, we succeeded." I glanced at my roommates hugging and crying, and a line of murky tears slowly slid down from the corner of my eye. Damn it, how could this happen? I'm so smart, how could I lose? Annie, how could she steal my body? I have to kill Annie, I have to kill them all. I have to get up, tear this body apart. But even with all my strength, I could only tremble weakly a few times. Because I was too agitated, I even wet myself. Early the next morning, the nurse carried me on a stretcher to the nursing home. In the morning light, 4 girls, fresh as flowers, chatted, laughed, and hugged each other tightly, crying and laughing at the same time. For the first time, I realized my smile was so beautiful. It's just a pity that I will never see it again. I just hadn't had time to tell my mother that I knew she always wanted to have a son with Liu Wen, so every day I put birth control pills in their drinking water. They would never have a son. That way, I would have a chance to continue my studies and escape the clutches of my mother and Liu Wen. On the afternoon I left, I put rat poison into the boiling porridge. I wanted to poison my mother to death, but she pulled out a wad of crumpled money from under her pillow, didn't bother to count it, and shoved it directly into my arms. "Get out, you good-for-nothing. Find a good man to marry later, don't suffer like your mother." My nose stung. I poured out the porridge. My mother glanced at me, a flicker of fear in her eyes, then stumbled out the door as if fleeing a disaster. What a shame, failed by a hair's breadth. I always failed by a hair's breadth. I am an ancient demon who has existed for 236 years, living a meager, leftover existence, neither human nor ghost. Heaven's Tao punished me. To shed my skin, the host must be willing and must say the 3 words, "I agree." This life is truly difficult, no different from getting married. After all, only the unlucky ones who no longer wish to live would willingly offer their bodies to others. Now, my name is Dao Fenglian, a crippled old woman. For the great undertaking of transmigration, I picked up a baby and brought her home, naming her Annie, preparing to wait for the right moment to entice her to say the 3 words, "I agree." So I poured all my abilities into raising her, making her fair-skinned, plump, cute, and lovable. When Annie was frail and I had no milk, I had to resort to my ancestral trade of digging graves everywhere, selling some burial items to buy milk powder. To ensure she was healthy, I dragged this old body into the fields to catch eels and make porridge for her, and into the mountains to catch snakes for soup. Annie's hair was sparse, so I swung a pole to knock down walnuts for her, bought black sesame, and ground it into powder to make porridge, forcing her to drink 2 bowls every day. All the money I saved for my old age was spent on food and drink for Annie. Watching her grow day by day, my heart bloomed with joy. Every night, when the child snuggled warmly into my arms, I would ask her, "Annie, will you be willing to let Grandma use your body later?" Annie nodded vigorously, her tender voice replying, "Grandma, I agree." See, brainwashing must start from childhood. Annie had to go to school, and the mountain roads were terribly far. I feared something might happen to my precious spare body, so every day I carried a flashlight to pick her up and drop her off. Annie saw me limping and was so touched she cried. She said, "Grandma, I won't go to school anymore. I'll stay home and help you, and you don't have to work so hard to pick me up and drop me off anymore." I was so furious I almost couldn't breathe. What the hell do you know? Grandma works this hard because I want you to study well and escape this godforsaken place. For poor children, studying might not be the only path, but it is certainly the path with the lowest cost and highest return. Even if I have to smash pots and sell iron, dig graves and steal from tombs, return to the old trade of an ancient demon, I must raise my child to be educated and successful. Annie didn't dare to mention quitting school again, studying desperately, so much so that even I felt pity seeing it. It's just a pity that in the countryside, when girls grow up, indecent men would ogle her with vulgar eyes, so I always carried a shining sickle by my side. Anyone who dared approach, I would cut off his manhood. Annie and Tina in the village were very close, but I felt Tina was too mature. Those eyes hid too many things. Sometimes I even suspected she had guessed my identity. After all, I had dug up the graves of her father, grandfather, and grandmother. I told Annie to stay away from Tina, but the child said Tina was very pitiful. I glared at her. Is she as pitiful as you? I dug you up in Wyong village. Annie snuggled her head into my arms, saying in a tiny voice, Grandma, thank you for raising me. Yes, an old woman like me, raising her little by little unconsciously, I had raised my Annie into an adult. Yet I felt there never seemed to be a suitable time to shed my skin, because the child was too small, thin as a stick. Oh well, I'd just fatten her up and then decide. The child brought me cookies, and once I'd eaten her cookies, I couldn't eat her anymore. 9th grade homework was too hard. I didn't want to do all that trivial schoolwork. I'd wait until the child graduated. My child got into university, I had to save some money for her to go to school. Saving money was the most important thing. The transmigration could wait. When the child graduated from university, found a job, bought a house, and had a good life, I would then serenely shed my skin, ascending to heaven in one step. Every day, I counted on my fingers, joyfully awaiting, thinking that Annie had entered university, another decade, and I would finally be free. That day, my withered heart suddenly pounded madly. I didn't even have time to lean on my cane, I just limped everywhere looking for my Annie. When I found Annie in Wyong village, the child only had one last breath left. I had lived for over 200 years, and it was the first time I knew I could let out such a desolate and broken cry. The cold moonlight shone on the ground. My child lay under the moonlight, her eyes slightly open, the bloodstains on her body already dry. She seemed to be clinging to that last breath just to wait for me. My child grasped my hand and whispered, Grandma, I'm sorry I couldn't protect my body. So she had always known. Tears streamed incessantly from my eyes, and my throat immediately let out a sorrowful, furious scream. Who did this, Annie? Who did this? Annie slowly uttered 2 words. Tina, Grandma, you must be careful of her. When Tina attacked Annie, she had screamed wildly, By what right do you look down on me? You're just a bastard child, an orphan. I know that old woman is a demon. She raised you only for your human skin. I will smash you to bits so that old woman can never shed her skin. I had witnessed dynasties change, grown accustomed to birth, aging, sickness, and death. I had even thought I was accustomed to the wickedness of human nature, to the heartlessness of the world. Yet the 2 words, Tina, still made me shudder. Such a young girl could possess such a malicious heart. If she had destroyed the body I aimed for and caused the death of my grandchild, then let her pay the price with her own body. I called the other 2 girls. It turned out to be quite a coincidence. Dao Feng Lian was actually Chelsea's nanny when she was little. She broke her leg saving Chelsea and was given a severance payment by the employers and dismissed. Unexpectedly, after many years, fate brought us together again. My possession of Dao Feng Lian's body happened later. Since possessing a body also grants the memories of the host, I naturally became close with Chelsea. As for Lily, she was the child who was tricked and sold to this mountain village by human traffickers. I hid the child in the cellar and then secretly let her out. When the child was rescued, her parents knelt outside the police car, frantically bowing to me, thanking me for saving their child's life. Otherwise, the child's entire life would have been buried in this mountain crevice. Although I am an ancient demon, I also sow good karma, and finally, the day came to reap the sweet fruit. Chelsea had spent a large sum of money to heal Annie's body, but Annie's soul was no longer complete. Even if life was forcibly prolonged, she would only be a vegetative person lying in bed. I couldn't let my child, so young, turn into a vegetative person. She hadn't seen the outside world yet, hadn't begun her brilliant life. How could she become a corpse? But the human body is like a machine. Once not operated, it will slowly rot and decay. I exhausted more than half of my cultivation, forcibly possessing Annie's body, letting my soul enter her body to maintain its normal function. Then, I transferred Annie's soul into my body, put on a funeral shroud, bound her fate, and waited for the right moment to possess Tina's body. The girls' dorm was the most suitable place to perform the body possession ritual. Here, yin energy gathered, full of vital young people, and an endless stream of life nourished Annie's gradually fading soul. More importantly, Chelsea, Lily, and I were all willing to offer 10 years of our lifespan to Annie. If we succeeded, it would be a win-win. If we failed, I would die from the backlash. Chelsea and Lily would also lose 10 years of their lifespan. We could only gamble, gambling on Tina's bottomless greed, gambling on her self-proclaimed intelligence, and gambling on her mother who loved money more than life. Fortunately, we won. I wiped Dao Feng Lian's forehead, then shoved Liu Wen's lighter into her mouth. Do you see? In the end, I still got Annie's body, didn't I? Isn't this also a perfect ending in a different way? In the nursing home, everyone praised Dao Feng Lian for being so blessed, having such a filial grandchild who visited her every week, always slipping red envelopes to the nurses, instructing them to take meticulous care of her. Every time others praised me, Dao Feng Lian would be so furious her eyes bulged, her throat full of phlegm, letting out painful shrieks and growls. She knows, of course, that I'm not here to visit her, I'm here to visit a prisoner. I have to make sure that the prisoner, Tina, is obediently and quietly sitting in the prison of a body named Dao Feng Lian, unable to live, unable to die. This is the cruel revenge of an ancient demon like me.